with the thing you always do.
He's burying the lead.
You're talking about everybody else but you. Tell people what's going on.
Oh, well, after all these many years, it's time to hand off the baton, and I am going to retire next year, June 1st. So we're going to take this year, the last ride of the road gang, and kind of do that retro thing and kind of keep that alive and maybe push it on into the future.
Dave Nemo joins me now. If any of our viewers or listeners have tuned into SiriusXM channel 146 for any amount of time, this name should sound very familiar. Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I got to see and hear you live at Matt's, where you had a very special and sad announcement there. Tell me about what you shared.
Well, the announcement was the fact that it's going to take me it takes me a long time to do everything. So why rush retirement? So I'm going to take a full year and kind of just make the year sort of a retrospective, if you will, actually, about not myself, but about the industry itself, about the people in it, and with a special emphasis on the trucking music aspect, because I came into trucking back in 1971 when Charlie Douglas started the genre of trucking radio, and there were many of the out of WWL New Orleans, 50,000 watt station, and he started it on Tuesday, and by Thursday there were 13 other shows out there, because it was seen to be, wow, yeah, that guy was right. The entire world of trucking has been not underserved, not served at all. Carl Haas on PBS, I'm sorry, on NPR, he did a program called Adventures in Good Music, and it was classical music. And once a month, he had a trucker's request night. And truck drivers would write in letters asking about, Tchaikovsky's Six, or, Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov, or Chopin, or something like that. And so the idea that truck drivers and radio go hand in hand was it was known, but not really recognized, I don't think, until Charlie came along. He went to WWL in New Orleans, which was owned by Loyola University, and said, hey, all these truck drivers out there, nobody's doing anything for them, So that changed back in 71. I had worked at the station as a senior in college. I started, and then I went into the Army. When I came back out, I met Charlie, and it was like, wait a minute, you got a guy playing country music for a bunch of truck drivers out in New Orleans on WWL. And Bizarro Worlds, Seinfeld's Bizarro World hadn't been thought of quite yet, but we were living it for a little while. And he and I, so at that time, the trucking regulations and everything had been in place since 1935 and then 1940. Everything was set. Trucking was regulated, so there wasn't any movement. There were no new companies being formed. Everybody was pretty much in their lanes, as we would say. So what do you do for these folks? Well, what we did was keep them alert, awake, and alive. That simple. And we took it very seriously, still do. Now, moving into day. Well, you think a radio guy could speak better than this, wouldn't you?
No, you're doing great.
Moving into days, people say, well, how long did it take you to get used to days? And I said, well, 1 day. But now we have a kind of a different mandate, because there is so much stuff. Well, you guys on landline now, do you ever get through all of the material you need to get through on any given program? I don't think so. There's always leftover stuff, right? Because back 50 years ago, there wouldn't be anything to talk about. Which truck is faster, the red truck or the blue truck, that sort of thing. So the whole scope of what we do, and that is metamorphosized into what you guys say at Landline now do. It just became, it kind of just went through the decades in terms of the development of trucking media, and now there is trucking media. So getting back to your original question, what we're going to do this year is just kind of take a look to the old road gang days, talk about the way things used to was, as the late John Parker would have said, and emphasizing the music because there are so many drivers now that don't even know 6 Days on the Road by Dave Dudley, the classic. That song was actually cited in a court case about the little white pills. Because that's in the lyrics, that's what got that guy from coast to coast, the little white pills. So there's a lot to learn about our heritage in trucking, and I think a lot of it can be I think the music can be the jumping off point for a lot of different topics like deregulation, the CDL itself, the Arab oil embargo in the mid 70s. When Charlie started the road gang in 71, I came on in 72. And then in 74, 75, the bottom fell out of the world oil market. And it was a geopolitical thing, and we had some violence on the road. We had trucking shutdowns. You weren't even born,
No.
So, well, a lot of folks listening right now weren't born at that time either. So I'm like the last of the Mohicans here. So I'm just going to try to bring back some of that to give folks a sense of where we've been in the industry over the last, boy, it's kind of weird to say the last half century,
I'm curious, how did you get your start? Kind of taking me way back when. How did you get your start in radio? What was it about radio that you decided this is what I want to do, and then getting into trucking radio?
This may sound a little weird. I'm a lifelong musician, still am. Music is the core of who I am in a sense. When I was in high school, the family would be out there watching television. I'd be in my room listening to the radio. And it dawned on me that what is making this so enjoyable and so entertaining, and in some cases even so exciting, it wasn't the music. You could go down to the record store and buy the music, the albums, the 45s, and play them on your record player. It was the disc jockeys that made it fun and exciting and engaging. It was the disc jockeys that talked in that radio style, and doing what we call walking up to the vocal. You don't hear that anymore, but in radio, there was no such thing as dead air. So when you started a record, if you're a disc jockey, I don't mean a talk show host, but a disc jockey spinning records, and if the record intro was a 7-second instrumental before the vocal starts, you would vocally walk up to that vocal, so that when you said, and here's a song by William Hank Snow. Here's I'm moving on from Hank Snow, and it's 17 minutes after 10 o'clock. Boom, they start singing, and it was that tightness, that flow that really appealed to me. And I thought, I'd like to do that, and I wound up doing it.
Wow. One question that people ask me sometimes, and I'm sure you've gotten the question as well, is the voice, the radio voice. You kind of referenced it there. And because when people hear you talk, I mean, when you say, I'm a radio host, I'm sure people aren't surprised because you have the voice. How does that develop over the years?
Actually, it didn't develop. That's an interesting question. And there are kind of two sides to the answer, not two answers, but two sides to it. And I'll start with Charlie. Charlie Douglas is a pioneer, but he understood truck drivers and their lives almost immediately. So when I came on board with him, when I came out of the Army, I went back to WWL, got rehired. I was only a part-timer, so during Vietnam, they had to hire you back if you were a full-time employee anywhere, but I wasn't. And the program director at the time said, Dave, I can't believe it. You must have just passed a guy on the sidewalk. And I'm talking about WWL New Orleans in the French Quarter. And he says, I just had to let a guy go. When can you start? That's how I got back into radio, so to speak. So I met Charlie, and I was the only one there that new Conway from Twitty, and that's kind of a joke in a sense, but uh, Conway Twitty was a great country music artist, had a baseball team in Nashville, and nobody knew anything about the music, and that was what we were doing. Music and weather was the two. The information that we gave was all about weather and road conditions. Um, and the music is what kept things going in comedy, playing some of the greats like Justin Wilson, Jerry Clower, again, names from the past again. And he said, the only way to make it around here is to be yourself. He says, a truck driver will spot a phony a mile away. And actually, you know this today. You guys talk about this sort of thing on Landline now a lot. Truck drivers get cheated and, messed up with and delayed. And, detention is a huge issue, as it always has been. The parking issues, but truckers have been lied to and cheated through every mile. And he says, so you've got to be yourself. You cannot pretend to be anything else. So I never had a radio voice like this. And now we're going to talk to Ashley Blackford from Landline Now. No, that's not me. And so the voice is the voice. And that's pretty much the way it is. Now, let me tell you this. John Peeler, the program director at the time, all of the announcers on WWL did sound like this, and I sounded like this. He said, be thankful you have a light voice. And, you're in TV, so you know what a light voice means. And he says, when you're older, you're going to be glad you have that light voice. So when I think about, that, I am always reminded that if you're true to yourself, then you're true to everybody else.
And I'm curious, did you have any background in trucking or,
I'll stop you right there. Absolutely
nope.
not. But again, I did have something else. And again, there are two answers to that story. The first one, let me just get it out of the way quickly. It's my military background. I joined the Army in 1970, came out in 72. And of course, everybody was cycling back and forth through Vietnam at the time. So I was accepted on that count pretty much immediately, But the other thing was, even though I didn't have any trucking experience at all, I had experience working on the Mississippi River. And there was a great affinity between the river and the road. Not so much between rail and road. There is one, but the river and the road, there was a camaraderie there that I don't think folks are really understood. The lifestyle pretty much the same. Now, I didn't go out on the boats because I was in school still, high school and college when I worked on the river. But I was a fleet man. I made and broke tow. The barges that are wired together with cables and ratchets, and then the boat comes and the towboat pushes them up and down the river. Well, I put those barges together and took them apart. And so I had that blue collar. When I came, I worked 4 to midnight. I worked 4 to midnight. And when I came home, my mother wouldn't let me in the house unless I took my clothes off, Ashley, because I was so greasy and dirty. Thank God I got off at midnight. So I think when you put all those things together, I think I've been so thankful and grateful that and blessed that the driving community has kind of adopted.
And I'm curious, when you think back over the past 50 plus years, is there one particular interview or moment that stands out to you?
That that's a hard question to answer because I don't remember a lot of stuff, but I want to kind of flip that question just a little bit if I can. And I was talking about this the other day at Matt's, as a matter of fact. In the earlier days, well, through the 70s and pretty much all of the 80s, things started changing mid to late 80s. The line of communication for a driver and his family back home, wife or sweetheart, generally speaking, was the telephone. and the telephones were payphones on the side of the road at a rest area or at a truck stop, and there would be a line of drivers. Airports had the number. Airports had the most phones, but truck stops were right a very close second in terms of the amount of phones. So people would call in to the program and make music, like the wife and sweetheart would make the music request, and then the husband would hear it out on the road, generally speaking. And we would get calls from families to announce the birth of a baby to the dad. And it's always been incredible through the years that a guy would come up to me and say, "Hey, my dad told me that he heard about me being born from you." And I thought, that's you can't get better than that.
Wow, that is incredible. I've never heard that before. So that is,
Yeah, yeah, it happens. Yeah.
gosh, how
Now
times
those
have
guys are
changed.
driving when they got kids. Okay.
Wow, that is amazing. Are you looking forward to the next year? I can only imagine that, having the year to really process everything, is that kind of the goal, to just enjoy the next year and then you'll fully retire?
Well, that's okay. There's two answers there. Boy, I'm two-faced here. Yes, you know what? It's been energizing. Jimmy Mack, who is with us on the air, he really came up with the idea of the last ride of the road gang, and the little badge pins that he developed and everything. And the idea was to I kind of put it in more academic terms, that retrospective idea, but that really has kind of energized me, to tell you the truth. And then when you say, well, when you fully retire, I'm not going to fully retire. I'm going to go into what I'm going to dub active retirement, so that I'm going to continue to be on the show. I'm going to continue to contribute, but I'm going to kind of do it. I'm going to kind of do what I want to do when I want to do it.
Well, that is fair after all these years. And how many years have you been?
That's a good question. Only I should be asking it. To my radio career, professional radio, I was in college radio, but when I was a senior in college, I got hired on as the part-time kid from school. And so that was December of 1969. And then I joined Charlie in the fall of 1972. So you'll have to do the math.
All right, I can do that. All right, wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to add that I may have missed?
Well, I just want to do a plug for our relationship with you guys at OOIDA. OOIDA was born out of the ashes of the mid-70s with the oil crisis and the turbulence. I'll say turbulence out on the road. So we kind of share an origin story, if you will. And we have a long history going back to Rod Nodziger, who started the Washington Trucking Week with me, and it's been on every Friday for, again, you'll have to ask Rod how I ask every time I see Rod, I say, when did we start the Washington Trucking Week? He says, well, I think it was, I forget when it was. And then he'll give me a date, and then I always forget what that date is. So there's some more math for you, Ashley.
Well, I will go out. I'll make Rod crunch the numbers on that one. All right, Dave, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, well, thank you for having me here, and it's an honor to be on with you guys here on Landline Now.
Yes, it was a pleasure to chat with you, and I look forward to the next year, and then of course seeing what you do after that.